On This Week in Hockey East, a couple of marquee matchups lead the way, and parity is the theme of the day. That's all coming up on This Week in Hockey East. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Hockey East. Along with Tyler Murray, I'm Eric Gallanty. We just keep rolling along here. A lot of exciting matchups. I think what's being proven every week is we can talk about any one of these games. They're all really interesting. They all have a bunch of storylines. But we'll start once again with our Hockey East game of the week, which is Friday night on NESN as Vermont and UMass get together. Tyler, what stands out about this game?
Yeah, two games at the Mullen Center this weekend. Again on Saturday, that's on ESPN+. When you think Vermont and UMass, you have to go back to last February. I think maybe the most impressive weekend we saw all year was from Vermont on the road. They had two shootout wins after trailing 3-0 into the third period. It was incredible. Friday, they did it down 3-0. They needed 4 goals in the Saturday game because Ryan Ufko had a hat trick for UMass that night. But again, they come away somehow with 4 out of 6 points with 2 incredible comebacks. And that feels like what the Vermont brand has become the last few years. They just don't give you any easy nights, and that's always a theme of Hockey East, of course, how tough it is top to bottom. And they just beat Providence in a shootout a couple of weeks ago. Now, Providence, of course, we'll talk about them in a bit. They come into the week ranked 5th in the country. It's a fun Vermont team this year. 6 NHL draft picks, and that does not include their leading goal scorer, Simon Yelush. He potted 4 goals across the first 4 games of the season before being shut out last weekend. So it's not going to be easy for a UMass team. They're up to number 14 in the country now, tied with UNH, the highest they've been ranked all season. And the Minutemen found a way to win against Northeastern in overtime. The Kenny Connors game-winning goal last Friday. That just speaks to their forward depth. I think Kenny Connors is a guy who could easily score 15 goals in Hockey East. He was an easy selection for the Hockey East All-Rookie team last year, but that was just his second goal of the season. So look for Connors to keep getting hot. Greg Carl was a big fan of him, but I don't think we've heard him talk about anybody like he's talked about goaltender Michael Hrabal in the same sense of praise that you hear mostly reserved for guys like Cale Makar and Bobby Trevino. And I know what that sounds like, but he just absolutely loves his 18-year-old goaltender, and you're going to see him in between the pipes a whole lot this year. Maybe you split it up this weekend with 2 games against the same team. Give Cole Brady an option. He's a draft pick as well. But it's not just Hrabal, who was a 2-0 breakout away from a shutout over Northeastern. It's the guys in front of the goaltender. UMass has a Hockey East best, 121 block shots this season. And then offensively, the shot totals are in the lower half of the league for UMass, but they are number 1 in Hockey East percentage points, just about tied with Boston College in shot percentage. About 13% of their shots are turning into goals. So they're getting high quality looks and they're taking advantage of them. Now, shot percentage that high, it's tough to maintain. We'll see if they can do it against a very gritty Vermont team this weekend.
That should be really interesting. We got 2 games for you this week, though, as we transition to Saturday and another Hockey East game to watch on NESN. This is at 3 o'clock as Boston University takes on UNH on the women's side. They will play Friday night first at BU on ESPN+, then Saturday afternoon on NESN. Kind of an interesting matchup here. You have UNH, who's ahead of BU in the standings right now, but they've also played more games. BU has only played 5 conference games, so they do have a little bit of room to move up. We've talked a little bit about UNH on this show, how they've played a little bit better defensively this year, how their power play has been very good, and it's worth noting they've scored more power play goals than any team in the league with 9 so far. That puts them also in the top 10 nationally. They're 3rd in terms of power play percentage at 21%. But it's really worth talking about a couple of different pieces. Number 1, Ray Brenton, who was the Hockey East Defensive Player of the month of October. She is the league leader in block shots. And then you look at what Sedona Blair has done in goal. A career-high 40 saves last Friday against Providence, helping UNH win that game. They eventually get a split over Providence. But they've been really close, even in the games that they've lost so far. And Blair's been really good in her last 3 games, just 4 goals allowed compared to 87 saves. So that's what stands out on the UNH side. Now, on the other side for Boston University, their offense has really been effective. Now, they played Northeastern in the first 2 games of the year and didn't score a ton. So that kind of brings their overall numbers down, Tyler. But if you look at what BU has done lately, over their last 5 games, they've scored 20 goals. Their shot numbers are way up this year. They're first in Hockey East in shots, and they're the only Hockey East team in the top 15 in the country in shots per game. They've also allowed the 3rd fewest shots of any team in the country. So the shot numbers stand out, and they're converting off those opportunities. That's been the big thing for BU. So as we said, a 2-game weekend this week coming up starting Friday at BU and then Saturday at UNH in another Hockey East game that we'll see on NESN.
I can't wait for the doubleheader weekend on NESN. Great stuff. Good coverage of both conferences and Hockey East. How about a rematch of last year's Hockey East quarterfinal game in the men's bracket last year? You're getting a home and home ESPN Plus Friday and Saturday. Northeastern against Providence. Of course, the last time they faced off, Brady Berard beats Devin Levi off a rebound at Matthews Arena. And at the time, that was a big upset. Providence beating Northeastern. A lot of people thought they would go all the way to the semifinals at least, but it was Providence who was able to advance. And their only non-shootout loss this year for the Friars is to Michigan, and they beat them the night before. So a 6-1-2 start for the Friars. And a lot of different things have added up to them being, I think, a really surefire top 5 team in the country. They have 16 different goal scorers led by Yaroslav Hmelach with 4. And their defense is the best in Hockey East so far. They're allowing just 1.89 goals per game. That's top 4 in the country behind only Cornell, Quinnipiac, and Wisconsin. We know how good those 3 teams are on the back end. And then there's goaltender Philip Svedback, who just earned his 3rd career Hockey East Goaltender of the Month award. He's just a sophomore. And the weekend against UNH, he stopped 48 of 49 total shots, a 20-save shutout on Saturday. We'll see if Providence can keep it rolling, because Northeastern has been so tough to evaluate. They've played mostly just 1 game a week. And they're probably the most banged-up team in Hockey East, especially because captain Justin Ritzkovian has been out since the season opener. So has Hockey East best defensive defenseman Hunter McDonald. Now, they did get Jackson Dorrington back last Friday, the Canucks draft pick, and that seemed to help. They had better structure defensively. They held UMass to just the 1 regulation goal, and they had better setups from the blue line. And keep in mind, with the absence of those guys, Jerry Keefe has been really happy with Vinny Borghese, how he stepped up into a bigger role as a 2-way blue liner as a sophomore. He calls him a number 1 defenseman now. And Jack Williams at the forward position, in a similar fashion, he stepped up in a big way to make some major strides. And they're going to need a lot of that to happen, guys continuing to step up. Their next 6 Hockey East games, 2 games against number 5 Providence, 2 games against number 14 UNH, and then top-ranked Boston College in another home and home. So it's not going to get any easier for Northeastern, but I think they showed enough on Friday against UMass that it's not panic button time at Matthews Arena.
And one of the other things with Providence, I think that's interesting, and we've talked about it the last few years, the fact that Providence so controlled the game with their shots, but weren't necessarily scoring as much as you might expect for the number of shots they take and the lack of shots they allow. This year, those numbers have almost flipped a little bit. They're converting even more. And it's not like they're first in the country in shots. They're still pretty good, but they're converting on a ton of those opportunities. That's what stands out about Providence. And I think the reason that they have some staying power in the top 5, top 10, whatever the case may be. Speaking of the top 5 and top 10, we've talked a lot about these 2 teams on the show, but we can't leave them out here again. Boston College, the number 1 team in the nation, going up to Alfond Arena to take on 13th ranked Maine for 2 games this weekend. First and foremost, this series is just as good as college hockey gets. I mean, it's everything that you want in a series. That atmosphere is going to be unbelievable up there. Maine is, new kid on the ball, whatever you want to say. They've been rising as a program here pretty consistently. Ben Barr's done a really great job, and they're in position now to host this Boston College team. It's hard to put something on this specifically, but this has got to be as good a series that has been hosted at Maine in a really long time. There's obviously been good teams that have gone in there. Maine's been good at times in recent memory, but as a ranked team in a ranked matchup, this is going to be really special. Because we've talked a lot about these 2 teams and what they're about, let's just dive into some specifics about what's worth watching for in this game. One of the reasons Maine's been so good this year is how, just like we were talking about with Providence in years past, they've really controlled the shots in the game. If you take Corsi percentage, those who are not familiar with that, it's basically puts a statistic on the using shots as the flow of the game. How many shots are for you and how many shots do you give up? And combining those two numbers into a percentage. Maine is second best nationally in Corsi percentage. They have the fifth most shots allowed. They have the second fewest shots against. So they're second nationally in Corsi percentage. Notably, they're third in Corsi percentage at even strength. Why do I bring that up? Because as good as Boston College was last week against Lowell, they were outscored 5-on-5. It was BC's special teams that ended up winning the day. So the shots are number one. Number two is how these two teams play at even strength. Not that Boston College played bad by any means at even strength against Lowell, and Lowell's a tough team, but Lowell did have some success there. Maine has been really effective there as well, so that's important. Then you look at Boston College and their special teams. So if you're Maine, you have to stay out of the penalty box because Boston College has been able to score goals on their power play. Even though if you ask Greg Brown, he feels like they're still kind of tinkering on their power play a little bit. They haven't maybe quite figured it out, and yet they've scored in every game on their power play since the opener against Quinnipiac. So those are a couple of things to watch for. Boston College has given up maybe a few more shots and a few more scoring chances here lately than they might like. So that shot number that we talked about for Maine is really important. But this should just be a spectacular series up at Alfond Arena, and I can't wait to watch. Now let's get to our final segment with some short shifts here. There's plenty to choose from, Tyler. Let's go ahead and see what's on the docket for you this week.
Yeah, there are a lot of options, but I'm sticking with Providence and Northeastern just in the women's league because this is a rematch of two of the last three Hockey East championship games. They're going to be in Boston on Friday night, then in Providence on Saturday afternoon. So you go back to those title games. Northeastern won 4-1 last year, 6-2 3 years ago. But, you know, it's a little tighter in the Hockey East standings this year. We know Northeastern hasn't had the year they expected so far. They lost 3 games all of last season. So far, it's 6 losses this year. But if anybody has the pedigree to get things right and turn this around, it's Dave Flint's program. And let's see if Providence can ramp up their scoring a little bit. Even though they didn't need to last Saturday, they shut out UNH 1-0. So for a Northeastern team that where goals have been harder to come by than seemingly they have been in the last decade, could be a good, gritty battle, low-scoring weekend. And we'll see. Does this jumpstart Providence? Does it jumpstart Northeastern? It could be a fascinating matchup for two titans in this conference the last few years trying to get back on the right foot.
And I think the amazing thing, we talked about that word parity, is that even though Northeastern has not been their normal selves to this point, the league is still wide open. So you're just looking for someone to go and grab it. And that could start this week with a couple of those teams, as you said, trying to find a way to bounce back. Can this jumpstart them a little bit? Speaking of, if you ask Lowell fans and Merrimack fans from last week, if you took the scoreboard out and you just asked how their teams played, I think they would be pretty pleased about the 2 games that Lowell gave Boston College last week and that Merrimack gave Maine last week. But they both find themselves 0-2 out of the weekend. So now a chance for those 2 teams to bounce back. Now, if you're Merrimack, you might be feeling it a little bit more because both those losses were at home to Maine last week, but both 1-goal games. Merrimack came from behind in the Saturday game. They were down 5-1. They scored 3 goals in the third period. Can that allow them to gain a little bit of momentum against UConn this weekend? And then for Lowell, they're 4-4. All 4 of their losses have been by 1 goal. 2 of their 4 losses in overtime. So Lowell has to feel like they've been better than a 4-4 team. But the task gets no easier this week against Boston University, who had a split against North Dakota last week. So 2 really tough series, but I'm interested to see 2 teams that probably feel like they deserved a better result than 0-2 out of last weekend. Merrimack and Lowell, how do they bounce back this week in Hockey East play? Should be so exciting to watch once again. Thanks so much for joining us for another edition of This Week in Hockey East.